So today we're going to bring it back to LinkedIn ads fundamentals. I think that's something that we always have in the background, but haven't touched on too recently. So excited to get back to our regular broadcasting schedule here. We're going to kind of approach this as more of a rapid fire LinkedIn quick tips or fundamentals for anybody that's trying to get started on LinkedIn and maybe some mistakes that you might see across the board. So, would love to get started with just our first point here, which is on conversion tracking. So, how do you set up conversion tracking on LinkedIn, and how do you kind of take that data and approach the conversation about conversions that are happening on LinkedIn?
Great question. So this is one of the things, and I'm going to share my screen here. The conversion tracking is one of the things that I think it could be a big miss with a lot of companies. We have a variety of ones that we've used in the past. And one thing that I want to just talk about is the difference between last and each touch. So you see, we're tracking our call bookings and we have a booked call last, which we have valued at $150. And we have a booked call every, or each is usually what you'll call it. And I have it as a low value of being worth $10. So what is the difference here? If you go in and you create a conversion tracking, you're able to name it. You can define what the behavior is and you can set a value. You can set the time frame. And then this is the really important one here. You have two options. You have last touch each campaign or last touch last campaign. And there's a lot of confusion around this of which one you should use. So let me explain the benefits of both real quick. Last touch each campaign, this is typically what most people have set up in their account. And the good news is it shows you the whole journey. If a prospect interacts with 4 campaigns within your ad account and then converts, this option, last touch each campaign, will attribute 1 conversion to each of those touch. So the good part is it will show you the whole journey. It'll show you that they interacted with 4 different ads. The bad news is you only had 1 call booking, but your account is showing 4 conversions. So it overstates how many conversions are in your account. Now, other agencies usually love to set this up because it makes the account look more successful than it really is. You're having 2 to 3 times more conversions showing in the account than you're actually getting call bookings. And it takes months, if ever, for some companies to untangle that and realize that the numbers are being inflated. So the good part is it shows you the journey. The bad part is it overinflates how many conversions are showing in the account. Now, the next one is last touch, last campaign. So now back to our same scenario. If someone interacts with 4 campaigns inside your ad account and then converts, this option only attributes the conversion to the last campaign they interacted with before converting. So the good news is you have a 1-to-1 ratio of conversion events to conversion reporting. The bad news is now, without seeing the journey that the prospect took to convert, you might think these other 3 ads were not important. You might be, wanting to dial back the spend, to turn them off, and then you'll dry up your conversions because you didn't see the journey. And I see this all the time. Like if you don't have this set up with your cold ads to track the each conversions, what you'll see is your cold layer campaign will almost never produce last touch conversions. And so if that's all you're tracking, the retargeting will look like a hero. It'll look like that's producing, and it usually does produce most of the results, but you would lose sight of the fact that it's the cold initial traffic sending prospects to your website that eventually convert. That's actually fueling that. So if you turn off your cold campaigns because you think they're underperforming, you'll actually dry up all of your conversions that are being collected on the back end. So what's the answer to this? My answer is to do both. Set up a last touch each campaign conversion for your main conversions and give it a low value. That way you can see the journey, but it's not overinflated with the price. And then set up a last touch, last campaign conversion event and give it a higher value. That's why back to this, for ours, we have the last touch, last conversion for booked calls valued at 150. And we have the every touch or each touch conversion for booked calls being valued at $10. And that's kind of the tip for conversion tracking.
Love that. And I agree too. I think that last touch last and having the last and the each is going to be a really important way for you to understand how your marketing funnel is working for you outside of just attributing conversions to that last touch. Something else that I noticed on your account that comes up a few times, at least in client conversations that I've seen, is kind of the unverified conversion tracking status or the inactive conversion tracking status. Can you talk a little bit about what those statuses mean and how you can, make sure that your conversion tracking is set up correctly?
So when you set up a conversion tracking, almost always it's either an action that happens on the website or a URL that loads. And so you're setting it up, but if that never fires, it has the pixel and the pixel knows if traffic hits that. So if there's never any traffic triggering that action or hitting that page URL, it'll either say inactive, or I think it'll just say like unverified or something. But if it used to be active and then it's not, that could be an indicator that something broke. Maybe the page changed, or maybe the insight tag isn't working properly. So yeah, if it's showing active, that means you're getting a good signal and it's seeing recent traffic. If it's showing inactive, it could either be broken, or you just haven't had that conversion event or traffic happen in such a long time that it thinks that maybe it's just not working.
And is there anything that we can do to kind of test if it's an issue with our setup or if it's just an issue with no recent activity?
I think the biggest thing would be double check the URL. So when you go into conversion tracking, you look at the rules. A lot of times there'll be an error in the setup. You added an extra letter, or you set it up that it needs to be exactly this URL, but then it's something that, every time someone visits that page, that URL is slightly different, or it has a UTM attached to it or something like that. So you really need to maybe switch to like, it contains this URL. It doesn't have to be exactly this URL. So that could be an issue. And if not, check to see if your insight tag is getting any signal at all. Make sure it's installed correctly, on the back end. So maybe check with your developer if you're not getting any signal. So there's a couple of troubleshooting things you could try to figure out there, but one of those three is usually it.
Yeah, I'd say that's what I see too across the board. It tends to be either like, a slight misspelling in the URL or the insight tag is set up wrong. So just wanted to touch on some of those steps that people can take if they're seeing those statuses. Something else that we have touched on in the past that I think is a really big topic when it comes to setting up LinkedIn ads is that LinkedIn audience network. And I know that that has gone through a few different shifts and a few different changes from LinkedIn as well over the years. So let's chat a little bit about that. First off, what is the LinkedIn Audience Network and how can you see if you're using it and whether or not it should be used in your strategy?
Yeah, so the LinkedIn Audience Network is kind of like a Google Display Network, or it's a network of third-party sites that your ads can actually be shown on. So that means that if your ad budget or your ads are getting shown on the LinkedIn Audience Network, they're actually getting pushed off of the platform onto other websites, various websites around the internet. And a lot of people don't realize this because it's on by default. If you have it on and you don't change the setting, LinkedIn could sometimes take 95% of your budget and actually push the vast majority of your ads off of the platform that you thought you were advertising on. So it's definitely something you want to check. And then the pitfalls of that would be, no offense to LinkedIn and the product marketers who are probably listening to this, I think a lot of those placements are very low quality. They have a lot of bot traffic. They have extraordinarily high bounce rates of people that click that and come to the website. And anyone who's looking at Google Analytics usually throws a fit when they see this kind of traffic coming into the website, because it just looks extremely kind of like junk traffic. So one of the ways you can check this is, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people know that this option's here, but there's this little breakdown option on your LinkedIn ads dashboard. And you can actually see breakdowns of conversions. So you can see the actual conversion events and the breakdown of those. But the other one that's on here that I use most often is on or off network. So if I click this, I can see then the difference of money that's being spent on the audience network that's on LinkedIn, or now they popped up this new category that's uncategorized. And the thing that you want to be watching is how much of your money is getting spent on audience network. So if a small fraction of your budget is getting pushed to audience network as supplemental, that's actually not so bad, because you're getting reach outside of LinkedIn. You're maybe hitting some people that aren't as active on the platform and you're following them around. But what I more often see than not is that way more of the budget is getting pushed to audience network than is being left on the platform. So if you see that, the way that you would kind of adjust that is if you actually go into any of your campaigns and go into edit, they do a good job of hiding it. This setting right here, audience expansion, that's one of the big ones you should turn off. We'll get into that later probably. And then the other one is placements here, and they hide it and they make it by default already selected. So it'll have audience network like this, and it's like hard to see. So you actually have to open that up and uncheck this and then save it, and you'll be able to turn that off. You are able theoretically to adjust. So if I turn audience network on and then I can look at the exclusion categories, I can actually go through here and I could create a list of like all the categories that I don't necessarily like want to show up in, and I could create this exclusion list. What I've seen is I've curated this to where I only allow like 2 subcategories theoretically that should be allowed, and still 95% of the budget gets shipped off of LinkedIn onto the audience network. So my biggest advice of this is if you think that the LinkedIn audience network would be beneficial to you, control the budget by simply taking your campaign, duplicating it, giving a small portion of the budget then to the campaign that is allowed to use the audience network, $10 a day or something small. And then with the campaign that is not using audience network, give that the majority of your budget. That way you can leverage the audience network, but control the amount of budget that it's allowed to take. That would be my best tip for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's an important kind of key piece of the puzzle that we chat about too is, how to mediate the audience network, because in a lot of cases, clients that are using LinkedIn still want to be able to leverage the audience network because there can be benefits there by reaching some of your prospects on other platforms. But in order to do so, we don't necessarily want to take a ton of budget away from LinkedIn as well.
Yeah. Very true.
And so while we're talking about like expanding our targeting and being able to reach more audiences, wanted to touch on that audience expansion piece as well that you kind of highlighted during the audience network setup there. So what is audience expansion by LinkedIn? Why is it something that you fundamentally turn off in all of your campaigns?
The audience expansion, to my understanding, it's almost like a live lookalike audience. So it basically gives LinkedIn permission to take the targeting criteria that you set and then expand beyond that based on what it believes might be relevant prospects. So it would be like if it took your criteria and then made a lookalike audience of that and then targeted that lookalike audience. To me, the whole point of using LinkedIn is its precise targeting. I want to be able to precisely target position title or functions or seniorities at companies in specific industries of certain company sizes that have budget. So the idea that I would then create all those criteria and then tell LinkedIn to use its best judgment and scale beyond that, that kind of defeats the purpose. And I would say, like, if you come from Meta or like Facebook advertising, you might be inclined to trust the platform to expand because Meta has a beautiful algorithm. Like if you load a lookalike audience that has all your past 6-month call bookers, it can find very precisely other people that fit that demographic and with a higher level of quality. Unfortunately, I do not trust LinkedIn's algorithm yet at that level of maturity. So I do not like to use the lookalike audiences, and I do not trust the audience expansion for those reasons. And so, yeah, I'd like to stick to the criteria that I set, and I do not want to give it permission to expand beyond. It's just like the other settings with like Google search, where it's like enhanced bidding. Like there's all these additional options that let the platform have more free range of your budget. And typically those are not a good idea because their job is to spend more money. Your job is to spend your money more efficiently, and usually you have opposite goals.